This is John Pasalis with my latest weekly update on Toronto's real estate statistics, where I'm going to be looking at the latest data to better understand how the coronavirus is impacting Toronto's real estate market and Toronto real estate prices. If you're finding these videos helpful, hit the like button, follow the page to get the latest updates. So this week, I'm going to be looking at the latest real estate statistics for the week ending Saturday, April the 4th. So when we look at housing data on a weekly basis, we compare a 7-day period this year to the same 7-day period last year, and we look at how prices and inventory, listings, and sales have all changed over that time. So when we look at the change in sales on a year-over-year basis, March started very strong, and we saw towards the end of March, sales actually fell 37%. Now, when looking at the latest week, sort of this first week of April, sales are actually down 58%. Compared to the same week the previous year. So this is obviously a really big number and is really just showing us how a lot of buyers are hitting pause on their home search, and for good reason. I mean, if you don't need to be out looking for a home, you shouldn't be, and that's really cooling the demand, which in many ways is a good thing because we don't want people to be very active out there looking at homes during this period. Now the next question, of course, is how have prices changed in that time? So when we look at prices compared to last year, they're pretty much flat, but prices have declined roughly about 10% since a peak we reached about a month ago. But as I mentioned in my last video, a lot of this decline sort of in average prices today has more to do with the fact that we're seeing way more affordable homes sell, far fewer luxury homes sell, and that's kind of pulling the average down. Now, when thinking about changes in house prices, I mean, typically what happens is you don't just see all of a sudden everyone's home fall 10 or 50% in value. Usually when prices change, it's because, people start to sell their homes for less than what they're worth, maybe because they need to sell or they're motivated or they're anxious or for whatever reason that starts to happen. And if more and more of that tends to happen, that starts to become a trend, pulling average prices down. Now, interestingly enough, these early trends when a few people start selling for below market value are really hard to spot in the data. So I tried to crowdsource this information by asking my followers on Twitter to send me examples of homes and condos that they felt sold below market value. Interestingly enough, out of all the messages I got, I've only saw maybe a few examples of this. Again, probably some very desperate sellers who needed to sell. So we're not seeing enough of that to sort of pull prices down. Prices have remained stable. And one of the reasons prices so far have remained stable is because of inventory. When we look at sort of the change in the number of new listings coming on the market, we're seeing a very similar trend. New listings last week were down 58% over last year. So again, for prices to fall, typically we need a big surge in inventory. And inventory at least has been flat, but new listings have actually been declining quite a bit, which has been helping to keep prices relatively stable. Another interesting trend I found is that actually houses are selling quicker today than they were even a month ago, which at the beginning was a little bit counterintuitive. But the reason that's happening is today a lot of the homes that are coming on the market don't have offer dates. A month or a month and a half ago, a lot of the homes, especially in urban areas, would have an offer date, which means they'd be on the market for at least 7 days before accepting offers. Today, that's not happening, so we're more likely to see homes sell in the first 2, 3, 4 days if it's a really nice house and it's priced well, because there's not a lot for buyers to choose from. So the buyers who are waiting for a home to come on the market are really quick to jump on these listings. So homes are still moving pretty quickly when they hit the market. Now, when we look at sort of these broader trends in the market, sort of what's going on in the GTA is not necessarily consistent across all regions. And some regions are performing better than others. Other ones are a little bit harder hit. So when we try to understand the areas that are harder hit, we don't really look at prices because prices are a lagging indicator, meaning prices tend to change after sort of some other metrics that we tend to look at. So one way of trying to understand the areas that are harder to hit are sort of understanding the relationship between the inventory of homes on the market compared to the number of sales that are actually happening in those markets. So to do that, what I'm going to do is sort of take a look at the best performing area, if we want to call it that, and that's Durham region. And I'm going to be comparing it to York region, which is sort of the hardest hit region in the GTA right now. So when we look at these statistics, the way to sort of think about this is, for every 1,000 homes that are on the market for sale, how many are actually selling in a given month? And when we look at the data for Durham region, sort of for every 1,000 homes that are available for sale, we're finding that about 500 homes are basically selling in the given month. And that's just based on the latest data for the last week if we extrapolate that out over a month period. So that generally means that if 500 homes are selling a month and there's 1,000 available, if no more homes came on the market, it would take roughly 2 months for those homes to sell. So that's what we call 2 months of available inventory. And generally that's a very competitive market. Homes tend to sell pretty quickly, and sort of prices tend to stay pretty stable. Now, when we compare that to York Region on the other hand has only about 200 homes selling for every 1,000 that are available for sale. So of course, far fewer sales, a little bit more of a sluggish market. And again, if no other homes came on the market, it would take about 5 months for all of those homes to sell. If we have 1,000 homes and there's 200 selling a month, we'd say that that's about 5 months of inventory. So York Region is a little bit more sluggish, and the way that kind of looks on the ground is, in areas like York, you're going to see far more for sale signs than you'll see sold signs, not as many bidding wars. And the way this impacts prices is typically the areas that tend to have a little bit more downward pressure on prices usually are the ones that have a lot more inventory relative to the number of sales we have today. So, how does this kind of help you if you're a buyer or a seller? I mean, if you're a seller, if you're selling in York Region and you get a price that's very reasonable today, you probably don't want to be the stubborn seller who's holding out for the peak price that maybe you would have received in February because the market's a lot cooler in your area. Whereas Durham, the market's a little bit more stable right now. And similarly, if you're a home buyer, you certainly want to be a little bit more cautious if you're buying in York Region. You want to be looking at comparables for the last week or 2 weeks at most, not from a month and a half ago. And this is the mistake we found a lot of agents were making when the market cooled down in 2017. They were using comparables that were a month and a half old when the market was very different, rather than using real-time comparables, because that's when you start seeing if people are selling below market value. So you don't want to be buying in a market and sort of overpaying based on what's going on in the markets today. You want to be basically competing based on the current trends in the market. So you want to be a little bit more cautious in York Region. Durham's moving a little bit better. When we look at the other regions, Toronto's very similar to Durham, just about 2 months of inventory. Peel and Halton are kind of somewhere between Durham and Toronto with about 3 to 3.5 months. And that's kind of generally what we're seeing across the GTA. So going forward, we'll look at how these markets are changing, what's going on in condos versus houses, and we'll see sort of how the statistics are changing from 1 week to the next. If anything doesn't make sense, please post a comment below. I'll try to answer it. If you have any specific questions, shoot me an email at askjohn@movesmartly.com, and I'll try to get to them either through these videos or personally via email. Until next week.